This is an Eye on Annapolis bonus podcast.
Well, we are sitting upstairs in a place that's probably very familiar to one of us, and we're here with retired Senator John Astle. How are you today?
I'm well, John.
Good.
Thanks.
It's always good to see you. I think last time we saw you, we were stumbling on Maryland Avenue, and I asked, how were you liking retirement? And this big old smile came across your face and said, this is great. I should have done this 30 years ago.
Exactly. I'm loving it. I still have my friends, but I no longer have the responsibility and heartaches of trying to deal with the issues.
Well, does the chair at Harry Brown still have your name on it?
No, it's at Osteria. There's a booth that has my name on it.
Fantastic. Well, we are not here to talk specifically about your Senate career or your retirement, actually. There's some exciting news coming out of your life in that you have a book that is coming out, or actually it's available right now on Amazon, but you're going to have a book launching release party coming up at the end of March, and we want to talk to you a little bit about the book. It's called Jungle Combat, a combat pilot's tape-recorded transcripts from Vietnam, 1968 to 69. So it's about a year and a half, I think?
13 months.
Okay, and this is something unique because Gemma Jablonski authored the book based out of transcripts, and you were telling me before we started recording that you had donated them the tapes, and I guess on a cassette tape or
cassettes. It's little cassettes
they transcribed them, and this is word for word your story. So it's not an autobiography because you weren't tapping on the typewriter, and it is a biography, but it's a really short snippet of those months in Vietnam.
13 months, yep.
Of your life. I've read not the entire thing, but I've read bits and pieces of it, and it's absolutely fascinating because you hear stories, but very rarely do you hear the words or be able to read the words. For those that are unaware of Senator Astle's career, you spent 30 years in the military, in the Marine Corps.
Well, it was kind of broken up. I had 10 years of service as a regular officer, and then I resigned, but I went into the reserves, and I did another 20 years as an active reservist. So I retired on a total of 30 years.
In the Marine Corps, you were a presidential pilot for a helicopter?
I was. I flew for Nixon.
You used to pick up broken bodies off the sides of highways here in Maryland for medevacs?
I did that. I flew for the Washington Hospital Center, their trauma center.
And you spent 24 years in the legislature here?
Actually, 36.
36? 24 as senator?
24 as senator. 12 in the House.
Oh, my word. That's
I did it for the parking.
Probably not an unsmart move, that's for sure. As I humped from 3 blocks away this morning, but 2 Purple Hearts.
That's correct.
31 different air medals, and I'm sure there's probably a whole bunch more because it's.
Let me explain the air medal, if I may. The air medal became, in the beginning, it was like the aviation version of the Bronze Star, but in Vietnam it sort of got bastardized and it became a scorecard. So for every combat mission credits, you got one. So I got 31. So that's 620 combat mission credits.
Well, 31 air medals, right?
31 air medals. So I got an air medal, and then I got the number 31.
Okay.
So anyway, it's,
well, that's so that represents 31 combat missions.
620 combat missions. You could do a couple of combat missions a day.
The one thing that really has sort of irritated me about Vietnam, and this is a war that was going on when I was a child and into actually a young child. So is that I don't want to say it's a forgotten war because we certainly know about it. We've got the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. And you see today's people that are enlisted, and it's, the people that are coming back from the armies, and they've made in the cheers and everything else. And that wasn't the case when you guys came back. And I say you, meaning you and the rest. Hundreds of thousands of others that came back from Vietnam. It wasn't welcome because it was an unwanted war in America that we shouldn't have been involved in, which really makes your story that much more compelling. A lot of people don't talk about what went on down there, and some of it is just internal repression, I'm sure, and others are, what you saw. I mean, certainly I would think that somebody from a helicopter probably didn't see the same thing as the person on the ground. You got these tapes, and what possessed you to record these tapes as opposed to, a little journal or something?
Laziness. I knew that I wasn't going to sit down and write letters. I hated to do that. So I took a tape recorder, a cassette recorder, and I would, and I showed you a picture earlier. I'm lying on my bunk in my underwear talking in the tape recorder about what happened that day, and then I'd send it, when I filled up a tape, I'd send it home to my mother. And so it was like my letter home, only it was a verbal letter. And that's why I did that. I had no sense that those things, I didn't even know my mother would save them. They were in a closet for over 40 years.
You even discovered these?
Well, my mother, we were moving her to assisted living, and she said, you may want to take these tapes out of the closet.
Wow.
So I brought them here to Annapolis, and they went back in the closet. But what happened, we had a Marine here in town, a famous guy named John Ripley, a retired colonel, who had some things written about him as well. But he was retired, and he was working at the historic branch of the Marine Corps. And I saw him on the street one day, and I said, "Hey, John, I've got these tapes." He said, "Oh, that's great, because we have an audio history, and these would be a good addition." So I donated them to the Marine Corps Historical Branch, and they did. They digitized the magnetic tapes, and they did a transcription, and he gave it back to me, and it went back in the closet. So what happened?
How long ago was this?
It was probably 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I was in a conversation with a friend of mine who is the sister of Gemma Jablonski, the woman that really put this all together. And I mentioned I got this transcription. She said, well, my sister would be interested in looking at that. So I dug out the transcription and I gave it to them. And a couple weeks later, I get a call from Gemma, and she said, there's a story here. A picture of a young guy that went to war all excited. I was going to serve democracy and do the right thing, and I come home as a cynical.
Yeah. I mean, how old were you when you went to Vietnam?
25.
25?
Yeah. I just turned 25.
It's kind of amazing that, you come back to the reception that you came back to, and the rest of your career was dedicated to public service. One would think you might be a little bit soured on that.
No. I never, I was just doing what I thought was the right thing. I mean, that's what I was taught as a kid.
Well, that's sort of the heart of public service. It doesn't matter whether you're enlisting in the armed services or serving in the Senate or, working for the city as a sanitation worker.
Right. You're right. It doesn't matter.
Wow. Well, so these were letters home to Mom.
That's right.
It's funny how my kids just discovered a Alan Sherman tape. Hello, Mother. Hello, Father.
Oh, yeah.
I briefly had this little thing here. Oh, my word. So they started out with, hey, Mom, here I am. I'm in.
Well, this is a kind of, my brother chastised me about this. The tape started when I got to Okinawa, because that was the first stop before I got to Vietnam. And so I used to take the tape recorder into the men's room. And so I say on the tape, well, here I am, Mom, sitting in the men's room talking. And my brother said, you actually told our mother that? Well, yeah, I did.
No secrets in the Astle household, right?
That's right.
Well, tell me about the tapes. I mean, we've got 13 months of them. What do they cover? This is cockpit tapes. This is...
Well, no, not necessarily.
Well, I mean, obviously you're not. Hey, we're. But.
Yeah. What would happen? I would talk about what was going on. We had this kind of mission today. And today we went out on a medevac, and this is what it's like. What you do when you do on a medevac, and today we were doing a resupply mission for a battalion that was in the field, and this is what you do. And so there was a lot of talk about that. And this is what I'm flying, and giving her a description of the helicopter, and and then telling stories about, this is the mission I had today, and it was pretty scary. And man, there's one point where I read my words where I said, Mom, you remember I told you when I left home, if I ever got in a really, really bad situation, I'd be too busy to be scared? Well, yesterday I learned something. You're never that busy.
What was that mission? Do you remember?
I do.
Can you talk about it?
Sure. This was my worst day in Vietnam. We were going to do a big lift, about 7,000 Marines. We had every helicopter that was available in Vietnam. It was going to launch out of the airfield that I was stationed at. That morning I had breakfast with a friend of mine, a guy I'd gone to flight school with, a Harvard graduate, and he was a part of that famous family, the author, I forget the name. Anyway, being Emerson. He was a relative of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Anyway, when we started the mission, our squadron was having to land in had a cloud layer over it, what we called a scud layer. And one of the things that they teach you from the first day in flight school, you don't fly into the clouds if you can't see because you don't know what's inside them. And so here we are. We're being told to fly through these. So I came out the bottom. I'm in the last aircraft. We had 12 in our squadron, and we were divided into 3 4-plane, what we call divisions. And I came out of the clouds. I had about 300 feet of clearance between the bottom of the cloud and the ground. And I'm doing about 130 knots in a turn. And I see in front of me, or off to my right, the first 3 aircraft in my flight. And the last 2 are the one in front of us going in the opposite direction. And everybody was shooting their .50 caliber machine guns out the side of the helicopter. So I'm screaming at my crew, ceasefire, because I didn't want to shoot down, one of my squadron mates. So I get on the ground, and we drop the Marines off. We take off. We got to go back to get another load. In the meantime, all of a sudden, one of the aircraft landed in a really bad place. And so there's all this screaming on the radio, oh, my God, I'm hit. I need the corpsman. And we're listening to this. And, one of the things about the helicopter, on the stick, there was a little button under your index finger. And if you pushed it just a little bit, you talked on the intercom. If you squeezed it all the way, you talked on the radio.
Okay.
So what it meant to those listening, to these guys talking, they were really terrified because they were squeezing that button. And so it was coming out. Anyway, one of the aircraft blew up, and a lot of casualties on it. In the meantime, we finished our loads, and then I went back to the base we were loading out of, and that pretty much finished the lift, and the other squadrons left and went back to their particular areas where they were assigned. So we were trying to get in to get the casualties out, but the enemy fire was just so bad we couldn't get them in. In the meantime, my squadron commander comes over to me and says, we got a recon team that's in trouble and they need an emergency extraction. That's a very dangerous mission, which means that these guys are on the ground, they got bad guys all around them, and they want you to come down and get them. And so, it's, just thinking about it, you get an adrenaline rush. And so I had no choice. I flew out, and I called them on the radio. And so what's going on? They said, well, we can't accept you right now. We're in hand-to-hand combat with the bad guys, so you're going to have to wait until we get this sorted out. So I flew off a couple miles, and I orbited, thinking, maybe something will break on my airplane. I have to go. So in the meantime, they're running airstrikes, and the gunships, the Hueys, are shooting things up. And eventually they call me on the radio and say, okay, we're ready. Come get us. So you take a deep breath.
And hope for the best, I guess.
And hope for the best. Well, I got down, I got them out, and we went back to the base that we were operating out of. In the meantime, they'd gotten the casualties out of the aircraft that blew up, and they got the bodies in body bags stacked up, or not stacked, but they were lined up on the next to the runway. And so I was the leader in my wingman. He and I were the last 2 out, and we were going to take the bodies to the morgue. One of the bodies was my good friend that I'd had breakfast with that morning. And I'm not ashamed to tell you, I cried all the way to the morgue because we took him to the morgue. That was my worst day. And during most of it, I was terrified. You know,
We hear the stories, but we just don't understand. Obviously, these are memories that never have left you.
Yeah.
This is, tapes or transcripts or books or not.
let me just change the subject on something a little more humorous.
Okay.
You mentioned that your father almost got court-martialed in the Pacific. He was a Marine as well,
Right.
and stealing a Jeep. Well, I told my mother this story. One of my roommates had a friend was in the Army, and we got a hold of a Jeep, and we went to the Army supply place, and we were getting stuff that we needed. The Marine Corps, our supply system. And I said to my mom, I guess technically we were stealing, but
We're all on one team.
over here the moral code just doesn't follow the same. So they had it, we needed it, so we took it, and we used it.
Where did Ace come from?
When I first went in the Marine Corps, we called everybody by our last name. And so when you've been drinking, Astle can be a difficult name to
I can see that.
pronounce gracefully. And so we were going out with some girls from Mary Washington College, which was right down the road from Quantico. And one of the guys said, tonight we're going to call you Astle. And so that way we won't embarrass ourselves. And Astle gradually morphed into Ace, and it stuck. And John, quite honestly, today there are guys that don't know I have a first name.
The mark of a good nickname. That's for sure. How was writing the book, or working with Gemma to put this together for you? Did you find it therapeutic? Did you find it challenging?
It was a little of both. Really challenging because some of the things, there were times when I had to put the transcript aside because it just brought back some of those emotions and just took the scab off, the scab of 50-some years, and it was emotional. And the challenge of trying to continue to focus on what I'm supposed to be doing here to make this what it is. And the irony to me is that I never, ever intended that these tapes would ever do anything other than just educate my family on what was going on.
Well, life is ironic. You never know the twists and turns it's going to take. I don't know whether in 1969 you ever saw yourself being a state senator in Maryland.
Oh, I didn't. I thought I was going to be a career Marine. Now, there's some times in the book where I'm saying to my mom, I'm just fed up, and I'm going to get out of the Marine Corps just as soon as I can, and they'll never get another day's honest work out of me.
Now, were you drafted?
No.
You enlisted?
Every Marine officer volunteered. No Marine officers were drafted.
So, were you in the Marines prior to the conflict?
Yeah.
Okay, so you enlisted.
Well, here's my story. I enlisted in the reserves in 1961 and went to Parris Island, Camp Lejeune, and I did 6 months of active duty. I came back home. I got into school, and I got into a commissioning program called the Platoon Leader Candidate. That was in the spring of 1962. And so I was on the train, so to speak, to get a commission in the Marine Corps, which happened the day I graduated from college, which was in June of 1966.
Okay.
Now, the Marines went into Vietnam in 65, but I knew when I got commissioned that
what it was.
We were going to Vietnam. That's just every Marine. There were 3 kinds: those that were there, those that were going, and those that were coming home.
Right. Well, I think that's probably not a whole lot different than the Naval Academy here in when in 2000. Yeah. It's like, well, we know what's on the horizon, and we need to figure it out. As we look at your career, which is a remarkable career as in service to our country and the armed forces and the Marines, as the pilot, as the state senator, as the state delegate, for a little bit of time. I mean, what do you feel what are you most proud of your life, or is it hard to?
Well, it's hard to sort that out, but there were a couple of things, I guess. In the Marine Corps, having been selected to be a pilot for the President of the United States was a pretty big deal. It meant that I was a lot better than I thought I was. You know, it's been one of my problems in life. I always think somebody else is better. The other guys in the squadron, they were better pilots than I was. But this guy was an enlisted corpsman in the Navy. He retired from the Navy as a captain, so he did okay.
Okay, right.
He was an enlisted corpsman, and he used to fly with us. And so somebody put this paper. He had written an article in a newspaper, and put it through my door at home. And I looked at it, and yeah, okay, guy went to Vietnam. Well, big deal. So did I. He was in the Navy. Well, so were other guys. Sort of. And he was stationed at Marble Mountain, and then I perked up Marble Mountain. Well, I was there, so I start reading this thing, and he's talking about this pilot. He said there was this one pilot that we really liked, and you went to the flight line. If you drew him as your pilot, you knew you'd won the lottery because you were going to have a good time, but you were going to get the job done because he would go places where others wouldn't. And he said. So I saved a lot of lives, and he was doing the work in the back. But at the end of this article, he said something that really touched me. He said, and when we got back to the base and shut down the aircraft, he would come and sit with us in the back and talk to us like we mattered. They did. They were no less than I. I was no better than they. Because I needed them to get, we were a team. Each of us had a role, and we all worked together. The crew chief was just as important as I was, because if things were going on in the back, I needed to be able to trust that he was going to take care of whatever was mechanically going on. I located him after I got this article, and I brought it to Mike Miller, and Mike said, I'm going to have this read across the desk, this article. And so I found this guy and brought him up, and he was in the chamber. And so this article is in the Maryland archives.
Awesome.
So anyway, and the same with politics. I always thought there were people that were better at the job than I was, but I found something in the political arena that really touched me because I could help make life better for people. I could help them fix problems, and that was my deal. I'm the problem guy.
The problem solver or the problem guy? A little bit of both.
Well, it depends on your perspective. There were people that thought I was the problem guy, but for my constituents, I was the problem solver. Can I tell you a little story?
Absolutely.
I had a guy come to my office one day, 85-year-old guy. He lived in the southern part of the district, which is low, in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And we'd had a typhoon come through, or a hurricane. We don't have typhoons. A hurricane.
Shipped out of the whole Vietnam.
Yeah. A hurricane had come through, and there was flooding. And in fact, the downtown Annapolis was flooded, and it was bad. Well, this guy lived in an area that was low, and his house got flooded. So they had to move out while the house was repaired. When they moved back in, the tax assessor came and said, I'm going to have to reassess your house, which meant he was going to lose his the tax credit, old people's, not whatever they call that tax credit. If you homestead,
right, the
homestead tax credit,
sure.
He was going to lose it. And he said, well, it's still a home. It's on the same foundation as it was. And the guy said, no, the work was done and you moved out and under the law. That's the deal. So the guy came to me, and I fixed the problem. I got a bill drafted, which fixed it, got it passed. The governor signed into law, so he and his wife moved back into their home with the homestead tax credit. So that was something.
And that's a bill that's helping people. I mean, I've got a friend of mine whose house just burned down, and she's relocated for another probably 18 months.
Yeah.
You
So this bill will help her.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you another one. I helped start the Annapolis 10-mile run.
I heard that.
Yeah. I was in the first one. And I won the first one, but there are only 7 runners, and they didn't know we were racing. But
Were there any better runners than you?
So anyway, I get a phone call. Now, I'm in the House of Delegates at this time, and I get a phone call from the race director who said, I just got off the phone with the state police, and they tell me we can't have the race. And I said, why? This is like 3 weeks out from the race. Why? And the trooper said, well, because it's against the law. And the guy said, I'm an attorney, and I've never seen in the Maryland code that these are against the law. And the trooper said, well, it's not specifically permitted, and our interpretation is it's against the law. So the guy called me, what am I going to do? I mean, we had guys signed up from all over the country. They'd made travel arrangements. They'd made lodging arrangements. So I said, well, let me see. It just happened I was the vice chairman of the budget subcommittee that had the state police budget.
Who would have thought?
And so I called the superintendent, and I said, what are you doing? You can't do this. This is why. He said, well, okay, you can have it this year, but no more. I said, okay, that's fine. Now, this is August. In January, right at the beginning of the legislative session, there was a bill introduced which made foot races on Maryland roadways legal. It specifically permits foot races. And the bill passed. The governor signed it. And so now.
Those are some great stories because, I mean, you have had a life of service. And I think that everybody would get a really unique insight into you. I mean, we know I moved here in '96. Okay, so I do not know John Astle from anything other than being in the state senate. You know, the one brief run for mayor on the second run for mayor. I know we talked about that on our previous podcast, but and that's, you know, I think it's a great insight into the other person. Do you have another book in you? Are there more tapes out there?
No, these are the only tapes I have.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people say, is there a sequel to this? Well, I don't know what I would talk about. And if I did, it would require me to sit down and write.
Yeah. And then we go back to that whole lazy thing.
Yeah.
right. Bring in the tape. But I guess it would, then again, this is a documentary of your time there as opposed to what you remember. And a lot of times there's some differences.
Yep. What I remember is sometimes different from what actually happened. You know, there's another thing I'd just like to throw in. We're sitting here at Harry Brown's in the room in the front of where the bar is. And my political career was spawned at that table right behind me in the corner. I was talking with some friends one night, and at the time I wasn't happy with my job. I was a police officer in Baltimore City flying a helicopter for the police department. And one of the guys at the table said, you should run for mayor of Annapolis. You'd be perfect. And I had just enough whiskey. It seemed like a good idea. And so I ran for mayor. That's how it all started.
Well, you do have a book launch party coming up here at Harry Brown's.
That's correct.
And that's on March 29th?
That's correct.
What time is that at?
4 in the afternoon. That would be 1600 for you military listeners.
Now I've got to do my math, bring my fingers out.
To 6:30 in the evening.
Okay, and the book will be available to purchase here, and
yes.
You'll be able to sign it and do pictures and everything else like that?
Yeah.
So on the party, we're going to have, the book right now is available in paperback on
Amazon.
That's and
right.
also you can get it directly from the author, which is authorgemma.com, JEMMA.com. Are you going hardbound?
Yes. I'm a bookophile. I love books, and I love hardbound books because I love to hold the book. My copy of Jungle Combat right now is a soft cover.
Okay.
But I've been marking it up with a magic marker because I'm pulling things out. I'm giving a speech. I'm speaking to the Daughters of the American Revolution in May, and they want me to talk about the Purple Heart Medal and my Purple Hearts. And so I'm getting ready for that speech using my experiences. But hard copy. Hard copy goes in my bookshelf.
Will we have a hard copy coming up on the 29th as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, great. So that'll be a first release, I guess. And you're familiar with the layout of Harry Brown's, right? A little bit?
A little bit.
For those that aren't follow the politics, Harry Brown's is sort of like the antechamber for the legislature, if you will.
That's correct. We're right across the street, and you can look out the front window, and there's the State House.
Are there any tunnels going between here and there?
No, there should be, though.
Probably should be. Okay, so we don't have a sequel coming up to your tapes because you've got two. How about a tell-all on the State House?
No.
Well, just say yes and put the fear of God into them for a little bit.
So, well, let's go back to Vietnam. Another thing, I grew a mustache, and it became my signature. I had a handlebar mustache that was the envy. Well, it's way outside the grooming regulations of the Marine Corps. But my squadron commander, who was a great leader, he said to all of us, "Hey, guys, as long as you're doing the work, I don't care." And so I had this.
Right.
Well, we were on a ship, and I had the misfortune of passing the Commodore in a passageway, and he saw that mustache. So he immediately grabbed my squadron commander and said, "That mustache is out of regulation, and I don't want my sailors seeing that." And so my squadron commander called me and said, they called me Ace. That was my nickname.
Okay.
Ace, we got to cut that mustache off. I said, "Well, okay, Colonel, if you can get the flight surgeon to come and actually do the surgery, we'll do it." So we had a big deal, and it's in the book where.
Cut it off.
They blindfolded me, and they went to a little ceremony, and then they cut the mustache off and saved it. And quite honestly, I was looking through some old papers that I had in the attic, and I found the envelope with my mustache in it.
Oh, my word.
So I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but that was. But we, and there's another segment in the book where. And this goes back to some of the things you're talking about the bitterness that we as combat veterans experience coming home. I'm on the tape, and I said, "Mom, I'm drunk."
This is the best part of the tape.
I'm totally drunk. And I'm going to say some things tonight on the tape that I don't think you should share with anybody outside the family. And so I talk about how difficult it's been, and the emotions that we go through, and the things that we've seen, and and I said, and I'm saying this tonight because I don't want to ever forget how I feel now. And I was afraid I would. Well, I did, but getting back to this tape and the books, it's brought back those memories of things that I had sequestered deep in my memory bank. So I think that's been a good thing. I still remember that I was bitter about the war and what they were asking us to do and the dumb decisions that we had to carry out. And there's another thing, and this fills it in, and I'll take your question. We flew out to this fire base one day. We landed and we went into the operations office or the shop to see what they want us to do. And I'm sitting there, and there's a poster on the wall, and it had NVA and VC, and it had numbers after. And then while I'm sitting there, a Marine comes out with another poster and puts it up, and it had all the units that belonged to this place that were in the field fighting around this area, and it had NVA, VC, and had numbers. It was the casualty count. It's how many of them did we kill, and it became apparent to me this is just about numbers, because we were fighting over the same territory. It wasn't like we take this territory and move on someplace else. We just try to kill all the people, and then we didn't, so we had to come back and do it again. It was just over and over and over the same thing.
I mean, they're horrible memories you're recounting here, and in your book through the tapes and everything else. And you've also, apparently kept on some good relationships with some of your fellow service members.
I did.
Throughout the year. I mean, was there anything in those 13 months in Vietnam that is a good memory for you? I mean, obviously, you've made some lifelong friends.
Yeah. Yeah, I met a blonde woman. She was a German, worked in a German little hospital that this organization had put up to provide medical care to the Vietnamese. And one day, some of them had come into Da Nang for a funeral. Some of their people had been killed. And so I get a call from the tower. They said, we got these round eyes out here that need a ride back to An Hoa. I said, well, really? He said, yeah, there's a couple of women. One of them's a little blonde. I said, well, tell them, and I told them, I'm going out there. It's 1 o'clock, and this is the airplane I'm flying. So that's how I met her. And then I used to drop in to say hello, and when I did, I'd tell my co-pilot, leave the aircraft running, and if something bad happens, you take off and leave me. Well, and then I went to pick her up because we had a big Christmas party at our base. I asked the colonel if I could have an airplane to go pick her up. He said, yeah, okay. Well, the day I was to go, the weather was really bad. And he tried to talk me out of it. But, Colonel, I'm committed. I got to do this. And we had a guy in the squadron who was a naturalized American. He was formerly a German and spoke, of course, the language fluent. So I said, Klaus, I need you. I need you as my co-pilot. So on the way out there, we had to get pretty low to stay under the clouds. And I took some fire, and I got 17 bullet holes in the aircraft. And so I get to the place where they were, and I called her on the phone, and she said, I can't go. You what? I can't go. I said, Klaus, come over here. Explain to her that I'm taking her back to Da Nang if I have to take her at gunpoint, but I'm not taking a broken helicopter back. And so it turned out she had a friend that wanted to go, and she, hey, that works for us. So we get back to the squadron, and first thing I did after I shut down, I took the two women to the colonel at his office, and he's, ingratiating himself. What a wonderful, warm guy he is. In the meantime, I said, I got to go sign off the airplane. I'll be back in a few minutes. So I went to maintenance, and I had to down it. Battle damage. So I get back to the colonel's office, and he'd established himself as this really wonderful, warm guy. And he looks over. How's your airplane? I said, it's down. He gave me that look. Why? I said, would you believe battle damage? And he gave me that look that said, you little shit, if I could get my hands around your throat, I'd strangle you. But anyway, and I went to Germany, spent some time afterwards, and then the following year I brought her here, but it didn't work out.
Okay.
So
I thought this was going to lead into to the happily ever.
No, the happily ever after. I met my wife in a bar in Annapolis. This is a fact.
This bar?
Not this bar. It was Red Coach over on King George Street. It's replaced by a condominium. But yeah, it didn't. Her friends told her to stay away from me. I was trouble, and my friends told me not to waste my time. And a year later, we got married, and in this June we'll celebrate 52 years.
Well, here's to not listening to either of your friends. For 52 years, there's a lesson in there.
And we're still trying to make it work.
That's for sure. All right, so let's get here to Harry Brown's on March 29th from 4 to 6:30. Grab a cocktail because the cocktails are very good here.
Yeah.
And come say hi to Colonel, maybe Senator, or maybe just old John Astle.
John Astle.
And get a copy of the book. Now, what's the significance? Why the 29th of March?
Because that's Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day.
How appropriate. How appropriate.
So, but another thing just came into my mind because this is what I've been signing when I've been signing books. One of the things that I said in that conversation I gave my parents where I was drunk, I said, I got a family at home, a mom and a dad, but I don't have a family of my own. What I have here are my friends. And with my friends, I live or die. And they're the most important thing in my life. And John, that's something that I've carried. And even now, I still look at my friends as very important to me. Anyway, and what I've been signing in the book, thanks for being my friend.
This has been a bonus podcast from Eye on Annapolis. Please visit us at eyeonannapolis.net. Follow us on Facebook at All Annapolis and on Twitter at Eye on Annapolis. And if you haven't subscribed to the Daily News Brief podcast, go for it. And all of your local news will be delivered to your phone, tablet, or smart device by 6 a.m. every Monday through Friday.